In the pages of Avengers number 39 by Jason Aaron and Dale Keown, the history of the Phoenix Force and Marvel's mutants intertwines in a potentially massive retcon that kicks off the Avengers Enter the Phoenix story arc. Hot on the heels of Dan Slott's retcon of Franklin Richards as a mutant in the pages of Fantastic Four, it's another instance of non-X-Office creators toying with the forces of mutantkind in the Marvel Universe in ways that might impact where the Hickman era of X-Men is heading. Today I'll answer, what's the Avengers mutant retcon and what is its significance? How much does the ancient history of Marvel's mutants really matter? If this retcon holds, what does it actually mean for Hickman's X-Men and where X-Men comics are going? Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa number 136. If you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel or Krakin Krakoa, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing, and commenting here with your thoughts on this video, theories for X-Men comics to come, or of course questions or topics that you would like to see me cover. You can find full X-Men and comic book reading orders over on comicbookherald.com. Spoilers for some discussed comics, including Avengers number 39, will follow. Let's start with what happened. So throughout Jason Aaron's Avengers, and actually dating all the way back to 2017's Marvel Legacy one-shot, there's been a concentrated effort to build out the BC Avengers, aka the prehistoric Avengers unit comprised of Earth's oldest heroes: Odin, a Starbrand, a Ghost Rider, a Black Panther, a Phoenix, an Iron Fist, and a Sorcerer Supreme. These clear mirrors of Marvel powers and legacies are explored across flashback issues and cutaways. We've already seen examples for BC Ghost Rider, Iron Fist, and Starbrand. And that's exactly what Avengers number 39 is, a flashback issue entirely dedicated to the origins of Earth's first Phoenix, and in the retcon that has everyone talking, also Marvel's first mutants. Okay, that is the big change here. Jason Aaron pretty much has the keys to Marvel history, and since his very first story arc, he's had them, right? He's been set on shifting history so that Marvel's Earth has had heroes, special abilities, and Avengers since literally 1 million BC prehistory. Reaching back and defining years of history for various characters is extremely common in Marvel this millennium, something I like to call the era of revisionist history. We see it in a lot of Ed Brubaker written works in the 2000s, for example, Winter Soldier and X-Men Deadly Genesis, and some of the most notable instances are Immortal Iron Fist, which is very, very good, and Jason Aaron's own time on Ghost Rider from, again, the late 2000s. As recently as Avengers number 38, we've also seen moments with Mephisto working throughout the ages to influence and manipulate the likes of various Marvel villains, including, of course, the X-Men's near and dear to our heart, Apocalypse. We see Mephisto whispering in Apocalypse's ear. Now, the development that the Phoenix Force came to Earth for a red-headed, possible mutant with the BC Avengers has been apparent from Marvel Legacy number 1, so that part alone is not new, but the details of this character's origins hadn't been seen until now. We learned that pre-Phoenix Proto-Jean is abandoned and left to navigate the Stone Age on her own, literally raised by wolves, Mowgli style. Y'all are gonna love the Dark Shere Khan saga, before finding the tribe without fear. And this is where things get really wild. As Jean Mowgli navigates the Stone Age, she encounters the tribe without fear, a gathering of outcasts and very different looking humans who are led by a Professor X-esque being with vast telekinetic powers. The parallel is, of course, Jean Grey meeting Professor X and the X-Men, but this time the apparent mutants are alive and for a time thriving in 1 million BC. To cement the world that fears and hates them, mutant parallel, the mutant tribe is senselessly attacked, Stone Grey's mentor is killed, and in her fiery rage, the Cosmic Phoenix Force comes home to roost. Before we really dig into all of the implications, let's be clear that Aaron and the creative team's story does not actually specify mutants in the text of the story, although the preview background info mentions mutants. It's not inconceivable that the beings could be deviants, given how much Aaron is playing with Celestials in his Avengers, the fact that we've seen deviants previously in this run, actually in the flashback to the Starbrand, and the upcoming importance of Eternals in the MCU. This could make some sense, right, to give deviants some more attention. It could be a twist on the Inhumans, but certainly this comes with its own complications, or it could be something else altogether. Plus, the use of the language "the tribe without fear" is a Daredevil riff that doesn't entirely make sense in conjunction with mutantkind. Unless possibly the group was really into Q-Tip and Daredevil comics, in which case, how do I join this club? Where can I sign? I'm ready right now. But clearly, when we're dealing with a red-headed proto-mutant Phoenix, the mirror image is purposefully set to all things X-Men. given that Aaron and team seem to be telling us not only did Earth have Avengers circa 1 million BC, but also mutants. And this complicates a lot. Again, if you look at the actual text of the preview, it says the Phoenix Force's history on Earth dates back to the very dawn of human and mutant life. Okay, that to me reads like confirmation, although whether the preview is considered part of the issue is a debate for another time. Now, generally speaking, I'm not the kind of X-Men fan who is particularly obsessed with the anthropology of the species or timelines around first mutants. I can barely pronounce Hyborian. Nonetheless, there are certain details about mutant history that have been apparent as a fan for a long while now. Firstly, Apocalypse has long been discussed as one of, if not the, first mutants. His name, Ansabanur, roughly translates to the first one. Literally, I was rereading some Uncanny X-Force by Rick Remender the other night, and they talk about this. They talk about Apocalypse as the first mutant, as if it is known canonical fact. But then you also have Selene, alongside fellow externals, recordedly even predating Apocalypse. These apparent facts were cemented as recently as the History of the Marvel Universe by Mark Waid and Javier Rodriguez, which came out within the last couple of years, that Selene was in fact like the oldest first known mutant. Aside from just contradictory statements from different sectors of Marvel, surely the first of their kind in all of comics, what's the relevance of mutants this early in the history of Earth? To start, please find the gap between Selene's recorded birth during the Hyborian Age, let's call it 15,000 BC, and what Aaron's Avengers is suggesting with the 1 million BC mutants. This isn't like a technicality, it's a massive, massive hole. And the biggest thing that I see it doing is creating an enormous period of human history with mutants developing right alongside humans basically from the jump. This is very much aligned with Aaron and McGinnis's first Avengers arc regarding the Celestials, and effectively the accident of a Celestial's crash landing and infected vomiting into Earth's primordial soup, literally, that generates what makes Earth special, what makes the planet a place of heroes and powers. And in this case, that seems to also include mutants, and that facet potentially changes so much. Fundamentally, the story of the X-Men and mutant kind is about evolution. When you look at the Silver Age beginning of the team by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, it's quite clearly the children of the atom arising in the space race 60s. Even Stan and Jack made reference to Namor as the first mutant, probably not totally in the X-Men sense at the time, but the language is still canonized. But nonetheless, there's a real feeling in Silver Age X-Men that this particular moment in human history is an explosive turning point for mutant kind, where their numbers and presence and simply existence is known to a degree it has not been for human history to that point. Homo superior is evolving, and the rate of that evolution is a concerning surprise to Homo sapiens caught off guard. The X gene is a species evolved from Homo sapien, and again, its explosive growth is concerning to those without X genes. Of course, throughout X-Men comics, there have been plenty of stories about mutants from prior centuries, from the aforementioned Apocalypse, Selene, and the Externals, to Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister, to Exodus, to Wolverine, to Destiny, and on and on and on. And honestly, as an X-fan, I don't really mind a 2009 story like Ex Necrotia that cements Selene as thousands of years older than Apocalypse. It's all sort of within a range of human history, and in isolated enough incidents where immense longevity at the character level doesn't really break anything within my understanding of X-Men, right? Like Selene and Apocalypse individually being very, very old does not break my mind necessarily on that level. Now, Aaron's Avengers retcon runs this risk because it places Homo superior and Homo sapien evolutionary trajectories more or less in parallel, where Marvel's mutants are less the next stage in humanity so much as the ostracized and harassed mutantdom that has been effectively losing to Homo sapien from the literal dawn of man. Now, before the likely vilifying of Jason Aaron, and I've seen plenty of that on social following this issue, there are a couple key points. First, for what it's worth, Aaron's X-Men history is actually pretty good. His work on Wolverine is good, probably the modern run I would recommend to anybody prior to the Dawn of X, although I am definitely a sucker for Old Man Logan. And Wolverine and the X-Men is a personal favorite with a great legacy that influences the X-comics of today. I talked about this in the Krakin Krakoa on Dan Slott's Franklin Richards retcon in Fantastic Four, but there's a definite feeling and irritation that non-X-Office creators shouldn't really play with the X-Men during this era. With Aaron, I do actually give a little more leniency because he's been in this space as a creator before and left it better than he found it, okay? I think X-Men comics are better having had Wolverine in the X-Men. Plus, it's not like we haven't seen mutant history messed with. Hickman and company just did this with Ten of Swords in the history of Apocalypse and the mutant nation of Arakko. Even more, in one of the Hickman-written secret histories of the Apocalypse family, there's a reference to En-Sabah as the father of the second generation of mutants. So there appears to be some planning here for ancient mutant history we've never seen revealed before, and while they're totally different creators across different titles, the assumption that these stories will run counter and break each other is simply an assumption without evidence, at least at this point in time. Naturally, the key difference in Hickman's plan for mutants and Aaron's use in Avengers is Hickman's is part of a mutant plan, whereas Aaron's kind of feels like potentially a cheap connection for a story that probably isn't that interested in developing the relevance of mutants at this stage in Marvel history so much as it is using the fun, big, red, fiery Phoenix Force. Honestly, the most likely outcome here is Hickman tells exactly the story he wants to, and at most there's a nod to Aaron's Stone Age mutants without really losing a step. Plus, if Hickman does have plans for a first generation of mutants from the days of Selene, well, now that can run back basically to the dawn of sentient humans, which could put it alongside the likes of his S.H.I.E.L.D. run, where he runs throughout human history, although again, not as far back as 1 million BC. Again, I don't think it's really the intent, but I do also find it kind of interesting to consider how Moira X's "we always lose" quote to Professor X about future mutant timelines can become "we have always lost" when paired with mutants and humans arising in the same space at the same time. Because now the story of mutants is one of genetic advancement and unique skills that literally always have been subjugated and decimated by mankind. If this is the case, if mutants have always been there from the beginning, then not only do they always lose, but they have always lost. That to me is a little different story. As for the Phoenix, there's not really much with the cosmic force of destruction and rebirth that doesn't align with Marvel history. The Phoenix Force has been around for eons, selecting a wide variety of hosts with an admittedly very goofy preference for redheads, so the fact that Phoenix is on Earth before Jean Grey is not particularly special. In fact, it's not even the first time we've seen that, as there's another instance during the Avengers vs. X-Men event with the Phoenix and an older inheritor of the power of the Iron Fist actually joining together, okay? Plus, we've seen this like way back in Excalibur number 50 in the Alan Davis era in the 90s, where the Phoenix Force has adopted all sorts of different hosts who were not Jean Grey well before Jean Grey's time. This might be the earliest instance, I suppose, being 1 million BC, but nonetheless, the Phoenix Force has been around and has gotten around. More than anything, the use of Phoenix in this arc of Avengers simply continues Jason Aaron's obsession with the entity. Aaron pulled Phoenix into Wolverine and the X-Men with a future timeline where Quentin Quire inherits the power. He did so again during Mighty Thor in both the future Thor timelines with Ancient Man Logan wielding the Force and during the Asgard Shi'ar War, and we've seen the entity teased for a return in Avengers, not only through the inclusion of the BC 1 million Phoenix, but through Namor, part of the Avengers vs. X-Men Phoenix 5, pining after the Force, promising it destroyed galaxies in return for defeating his enemies, namely the Avengers. Aaron loves using the Phoenix, and the Force's X-relevance was never really going to change that, okay? He was going to be able to tell a Phoenix story if he so chooses. My prediction here is that Aaron will tell his Phoenix story in Avengers. There will be very mild crossover with the relevant X characters, who of course have to at least acknowledge that the Force is on Earth. I mean, it's gonna come up. But at the end of the day, I don't think Aaron's short-term use will really derail anything Hickman and the X office have planned. Again, as far as I can tell, and like my prediction here is that the Phoenix Force is not going to show up in the Hickman X-Men in any meaningful way until we are in the endgame, okay? And this stems from the Powers of 10 data pages where we talk about probably the hardest sci-fi of the Whole House Powers bit, where we talk about dominions and galactic intelligences. And there's that key bolded note there saying that, you know, beyond universal abstracts, the only primal threats that a dominion fears are the World Eater Galactus and the singular universal manifestation of life, the Phoenix. It's not until we get to like the phalanx and talking about dominions and galactic intelligences and the final end stage long game of Moira X's plan for mutant kind that I think it makes much of any sense to have the Phoenix really on board. Unless it was something where like it comes earlier and they bottle it up or they keep a Phoenix egg, a concept that Hickman really likes. He used it in Secret Wars with Cyclops actually. But unless it's that, I don't think the Phoenix is really going to have a major role to play until we get to like endgame stuff. And obviously we just entered the Reign of X at the time of this Avengers issue, at the time of this Avengers arc. We're not there yet in the Hickman era where the Phoenix is going to play a major role. So, I mean, all that said, like, I think it's interesting to consider and really analyze this stuff, but I don't think it's going to break X-Men, necessarily. And there was a really interesting, I meant to put it up on here and then I forgot, but there was an interesting interview Hickman did with Adventures in Poor Taste not too long ago, where there was a question about the Dan Slott, Franklin Richards retcon, and basically saying like, hey, how does this mess with your stories? And Hickman had a really good answer, which he typically does in interviews. But this one was basically to the effect of like, I have a plan for the stories I want to tell. And, I've been through this before with Marvel, right? Like during my Avengers run, I had, point A to point B stuff, but that didn't account for example, the Rick Remender Captain America run aging up Steve Rogers. So now all of a sudden he was old man Steve Rogers. But nonetheless, that's part of the gig, right? You roll with that essentially. So basically saying like there are going to be fluctuations across because there are other creators telling their stories. And basically him saying like, I've already adapted to that before. I know how to do it. I, as a reader, have a lot of confidence that remains true here. It's going to remain true with X-Men, and I personally am unconcerned about this Phoenix story arc and these first mutants. If also just kind of I guess the main reason being like we don't necessarily have to give it a lot of credence if it doesn't work well or if it doesn't hold up, because the X-Men comics are going to do what they were going to do from the beginning. And if Avengers makes it weird, that's going to be like an asterisk and a side note, I think, in the long run. So I'm curious to see where Aaron's Avengers Phoenix arc plays out. I haven't been a huge fan of this run. I think its ambition is massive and often outweighs its actual quality. But for those of you who are into it, I'm curious, if you're excited to see the Phoenix return. I feel like there's a lot of Phoenix burnout, frankly, in general amongst Marvel fans. But let me know in the comments. I want to hear your theories on: are you excited for more Phoenix? When's it going to come into the House of X or the Hickman era narrative? Are you excited about this change to the first mutants? Does it matter to you? What does it do? Are you excited about the potential for centuries of older mutant stories? Right? There's potentially a lot of interesting stuff that could happen there. So let me know in the comments your theories, your predictions, your thoughts on this retcon. So, hey everybody, thanks for supporting Comic Book Herald and Krakin Krakoa. Those of you who do so over on patreon.com/Comic Book Herald, thank you so much. Thanks Jesse W., Professor Pride, Cole Weathers, Martin Lopez, Chris Isidro, Brent Bowser, Professor X3769, and PD Appleseed for joining the mysterious benefactors tier. In particular, is very, very generous support of CBH. I'm Dave. You can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald, pretty much anywhere on social. Look for the best comics ever and My Marvelous Year podcast for more from me. So thanks everybody for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.